The day Steve Jobs walked back into Apple, he wasn't smiling. The company he had co-founded was losing hundreds of millions of dollars. Its product line was chaotic. Analysts openly discussed bankruptcy. Inside the headquarters in Cupertino, employees didn't know whether the company would survive another year. 10 years earlier, those same offices had thrown him out, and that humiliation had started with a single vote. Steve Jobs was born in San Francisco in 1955 and adopted shortly after birth by Paul and Clara Jobs. His father taught him to take apart engines and rebuild them with precision. One lesson stayed with him. Even the parts nobody sees should be beautifully made. That obsession would make him famous. It would also nearly destroy everything. In 1976, at just 21 years old, Jobs and Steve Wozniak founded Apple in a garage in Los Altos. The Apple II became one of the first mass-market personal computers. Within a few years, Apple was worth billions. It looked like the beginning of an unstoppable empire. It wasn't. Jobs wanted to build the Macintosh as the computer that would change the world. He pushed engineers beyond exhaustion, demanded impossible deadlines, and rejected work that most companies would have accepted immediately. The Macintosh launched in 1984 with one of the most iconic commercials ever produced. Sales exploded. Then they slowed. Fast. The computer was expensive, had limited software, and revenue failed to meet expectations. Inside Apple, tensions grew between Jobs and CEO John Sculley. The executive Jobs himself had recruited from Pepsi with one question: do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or come with me and change the world? 1 year later, the relationship collapsed. Board meetings became battlefields. Jobs tried to regain control. The board backed Sculley instead. At just 30 years old, Steve Jobs lost operational control of the company he had created. He walked out of Apple's headquarters carrying almost nothing. The company that bore his fingerprints no longer wanted him. For weeks, he considered leaving Silicon Valley entirely. He later admitted he felt publicly defeated. The prodigy who had transformed personal computing had become the executive who had been fired by his own board. Most founders never recover from a moment like that. Jobs did something nobody expected. Instead of trying to get Apple back, he started over. He founded a new computer company called Next. The timing couldn't have been worse. Next computers were technologically remarkable, but far too expensive for the mainstream market. Sales remained disappointing. Critics called the company another example of Steve Jobs' ego-overpowering business reality. Then came another blow. The company kept burning cash. Investors questioned whether Next would ever become profitable. For many observers, this was proof that Apple's success had belonged to the team, not to Jobs. For the first time, that accusation sounded believable. And then something happened that almost nobody noticed. While Next struggled to sell computers, it quietly built one of the most advanced operating systems in the industry. At the time, it looked completely irrelevant. Years later, that failure would become the most valuable thing Jobs had ever built. The irony was brutal. The product nobody wanted to buy was exactly what Apple desperately needed. By 1996, Apple was collapsing. The company had lost direction. Its products were fragmented, and its software was years behind competitors. Executives searched for a solution. The answer was the company many had already written off. Next, Apple agreed to buy Next for approximately $429 million. The acquisition wasn't really about the hardware, it was about the operating system. And it brought Steve Jobs back through the same doors he had left 11 years earlier. At first, he wasn't CEO, he was simply an advisor, but as losses mounted and confidence disappeared, leadership changed. In 1997, Jobs became Apple's interim CEO. Then came another decision that looked reckless. He eliminated around 70% of Apple's products. Computers, printers, accessories, projects that had consumed years of work, gone. Employees feared the company was shrinking because it was dying. Jobs believed it had to shrink to survive. Then he made an even more shocking move. He accepted a $150 million investment from Microsoft, Apple's biggest rival. The announcement was met with boos from the audience. To many fans, It looked like surrender. Jobs saw something different. He wasn't trying to win applause, he was buying Apple time. The company stabilized. Then the products arrived. The iMac, the iPod, the iTunes Store, the iPhone. Each launch built on the same philosophy his adoptive father had taught him decades earlier. Even the parts nobody sees should be made with care. That small lesson inside a family garage had survived boardroom battles, public humiliation, and 11 years of exile. By the time of his death in 2011, Apple had become one of the most valuable companies in the world. But the story was never really about a man returning to save his company. It was about a man who discovered that being forced to leave was the only reason he learned how to build something even greater. The board believed they were removing Steve Jobs from Apple. What they actually did was give him the years that would teach him how to reinvent it. And that's why the most important day in Steve Jobs' career wasn't the day he founded Apple. It was the day he walked out of it, believing he had lost everything, because the company that finally changed the world was built by a man who had already experienced what it felt like to lose his own. That's his story. Every week on Silent Grind, one more person who was counted out and didn't stay down. Subscribe. The next one might be exactly what you needed to hear.